For the longest time, I recall people asking about whether or not a Freaky Friday sequel would ever happen. While the 2003 movie is not the first time that book was adapted to screen, it might be the most popular of the adaptations, and it was a movie that was loved by a lot of people, and over the years since its release, it's gotten more and more fans. I remember watching the movie back in the day. I think I saw it on Disney Channel, in fact, and it was a very entertaining watch. I thought Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis were very good in it, and there was a lot of fun to be had, a lot of humor, and a lot of very fun comedy moments. But the idea of a sequel just seemed like this far-fetched idea, like maybe it'll happen someday, who knows. Well, 22 years later, Freakier Friday is about to hit theaters this weekend. And in this one, things are changing quite rapidly in Anna's life as her daughter, Harper, played by Julia Butters, is a teenager who is rebelling against her. And she's also just fallen in love with a man named Eric, played by Manny Jacinto. And Harper is even more affected by this because Eric's daughter is a girl named Lily, played by Sophia Hammonds, who can't stand her. And as all of this is coming to a head, another body swapping takes place. However, this time it's not just Anna and Tess who are affected, it's also the two teenage girls, as they've all swapped bodies with one another. So now the adults are the teenagers and the teenagers are the adults. And they essentially have to figure out how they're gonna fix all of this up. Now, like I said, the first movie is a lot of fun. And the concept of being able to do like body swapping like this, to create some really fun antics, it's an idea that works pretty well. I mean, there are a lot of great moments you got out of that first movie. And so going into the second movie, I was very curious to see what they were going to do and how much they were going to try and retain what they did in that original movie. And I would say after watching Freakier Friday, they mostly did capture enough of that spirit. And the reason it works so well is, I think the reason why the first one also worked so well is that the level of earnestness and the amount of delightfulness that is brought to the premise itself. Because if you're gonna make something like this work, where you're already having characters play different ages and different situations that they're in, where they have to pretend to be older or younger depending on how it is, to have all of these situations play out, the amount of dedication that's going into a premise like this, it really requires everyone just being on the same page. And that is something that comes through in spades when it comes to Freakier Friday. The cast is really good in that regard. Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis, it really feels like they haven't missed a day between movies. It feels like the first one just got made and they've slipped right back into the roles for this one. Not a beat missed between them. Not a moment where the comedy between them feels off either. It really does feel like they're both on that same plane once again. And they both do a really great job over here. And there's a lot of moments where now with even, Anna being, in the teenage body, which was something that Tess has already done before, so now this is the second time that's happening, to have it play out the way that it does, and just to see all of these things happen on screen as they're trying to go through the day while trying to pose as adults while they're not actually adults. It leads to some incredibly funny moments, and I think they did a solid work when it came to that aspect. That's something that I can say and vice versa when it comes to the two teenagers who are played by Julia Butters and Sophia Hammonds. Having them do the opposite, where they're pretending to still be teenagers, even though those are now two adults who are body swap with them. Just having them try to navigate through things and, try to appear as normal as possible, while also just pointing out some of the crazy stuff that's happening that they remember as kids perhaps. It just makes for some really fun viewing. And some of the antics that you get from that were very entertaining. There's also some great work from the supporting characters here. I thought Manny Jacinto was really good in the movie as Eric. There's some really heartfelt moments from him, along with some very funny beats as well. I thought he did a great job there. And the same can be said for Chad Michael Murray as Jake. He comes back for this movie. He's very funny over here, and I thought he did a really good job too. In fact, he's one of the funnier aspects of it. Vanessa Bayer is extremely funny over here. She plays this psychic who's like trying to figure out what's happening as well, and the fact that she sort of may have some answers as to what's going on. You run into her a few times, and she's really, really funny in the movie too. I thought the movie was directed nicely too. Nisha Ganatra, who directed the movie, she's made movies like Late Night before, which I thought was also very charming and funny. There is that very similar charming and funny spirit to this movie, and having things play out as they do, like with the kind of resolutions that they have, trying to sort of understand one another, because again, you have to remember some of these characters don't really get along with one another. It's like Harper and Lily. They can't stand each other. And while they're trying to understand this relationship that Anna seems to have with Eric, it's like, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? Just seeing that dynamic play out as well, it's nicely executed stuff. And there's some great technical stuff that you get along the way too, like when it comes to the costume designs and stuff, because one of the characters in the movie is very passionate about fashion and wants to be a fashion designer, and so you get to do a lot of work with costumes as a result of that. Or there's aspects where music becomes a big part of things, so there's a very vibrant soundtrack to the entire movie as well, which I think is the movie evokes the 2000s in a lot of ways, because if you recall the 2000s, soundtracks were a very big part of things, and that's something that does come through over here quite a bit over as well. The movie does take a while to get going. The first 20-25 minutes, I would actually say, are kind of rough. Like when you're just about setting out on what this movie is going to do, that initial setup with the characters, it's a little rough around the edges. There's some clunky dialogue between the characters, some of it doesn't really land, and there's some humor, especially in that bit, which isn't really working. Once you're past all of that, and when you really get into the freakier aspect of the movie, where things really start to go down, it picks up considerably. And from that point on until the end, I was having a fun time with it overall. But there is that initial bit which I thought was a bit rough. And when it comes to the storytelling in general, because you're now dealing with multiple body swaps, and they all have very different arcs and stories to deal with, and a lot of time where they have to act like themselves or act like someone else, they have to keep switching around like that. It can get a little messy at times because there's a lot of that happening at once, and it does become a little unwieldy trying to sort of keep track of everything. The movie does a fairly decent job overall trying to keep it together as much as possible, but there were a few moments in the second act in particular where it was like, all right, few jumbled pieces here and there. Also, something that I did notice is that there's a couple of times in the movie where some of the ADR work and like some of the sound design was a little off. There's a couple of moments of dialogue where it's very clear that the person is not saying the thing that is being, said out loud. So you can see the back of her head, and it's like the mouth movements and all that. It's like the way that this dialogue is being delivered is not matching up to how the head movements are happening. So you can kind of tell like that audio is a bit off. And sometimes it does lead to a few choppy moments of editing, which is something that was a little irksome a couple of times that happened. Still, despite all of that, because the movie, it does manage to, retain a lot of that charm and a lot of the creativeness of the original. But still, despite those things, because the movie is able to still hang on to a lot of the charming sense of that original, and also just be able to bring it to this new generation while also doing a really good job of making a good sequel on its own, the movie still does succeed overall. Do I think that Freakier Friday will be remembered as much as Freaky Friday? Time will tell. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I do think this is a solid follow-up to that movie, and it's worth watching. And I'm gonna give Freakier Friday a 7.5 out of 10. Guys, thank you very much as always for watching. Look forward to more videos very soon. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the movies.